You know that feeling when everything seems normal, but something, a small detail, leaves you speechless? That morning, Mom sat at the kitchen table, her eyes glued to her cooling tea, her hands shaking so much she could barely hold the spoon. She didn't complain as usual, but I could tell something was missing. And it wasn't just her health. At 70, my mother is still the kind of woman who likes to do things her own way, from watering her plants in the morning to peeling an apple into a perfect spiral. But lately, things seem to have slowed down, or rather fade away. She slept lightly, waking up at 3 a.m. just to stare at the ceiling. Every time she stood up, she had to hold onto the furniture as if the floor had suddenly tilted somewhere. And her voice grew quieter, as if she were shrinking away, not from weakness, but from fatigue. I started to panic. No noise, no tears, but the fear crept in like the wind through a crack in the door at night. You can't see it, but you know it's there. Millions of people around the world enter old age with physical decline, but few talk about the feeling of being low yourself. Loss of ability, loss of routine, loss of joy, and loss of presence. There were times when I thought, it must be just old age. But that's the dangerous way of thinking. We're so used to seeing aging as a slow death, so when it comes, we don't react. We sit there, watch the person we love fade away, and accept it. The problem isn't just physical. A recent study found that lack of sleep and poor diets in older adults can lead to silent depression, increasing the risk of cognitive decline by 40%. Which makes me wonder, are we underestimating the impact of a single meal? I started questioning what my mother was eating. The foods were called supplements, but what supplements? And some of the things that seemed healthy turned out to be counterproductive. Low-fat milk? It might weaken your bones. Whole wheat bread? Yeah, that was good. But my mother's blood sugar was skyrocketing after breakfast. The advice seemed contradictory. So I started to wonder, should I eat or not? What I didn't expect was, the solution wasn't something new. It had been in the kitchen for a long time. We just hadn't seen it yet. If you've ever lived with an older person, decline doesn't come like a car accident. It comes like rust. Quietly, steadily, slowly eating away at the inside. With my mother, the signs started with little things. A lack of time to get out of bed in the morning, unusually long yawns, and I couldn't sleep last night. I used to think it was normal. Who doesn't do that at 70? But then, it all added up. Fatigue made her skip breakfast. Lack of energy made her lose the will to walk. And lack of movement made it even harder for her to sleep. A vicious cycle continued, unwarned. Sleep. That's the first thing to be stolen. When an older person is chronically sleep-deprived, the brain is no longer properly cleared. Neurotoxins build up, and then researchers say the risk of Alzheimer's can skyrocket. It's not a case of, I'm getting old. It's a case of, I'm losing touch with my body. Plus, there were the bones. Mom no longer walked up the stairs without thinking. Each step made her frown, walking carefully as if avoiding a trap. I asked the doctor and received the usual answers. It's just natural degeneration. You can take calcium supplements. But Mom had been taking them for years. What no one told her was, the aging body doesn't absorb them as well as when it was young, and those white tablets sometimes just pass. I noticed that my mother started to refuse to go out, citing too much sun, too tired, but really, self-consciousness. Her frazzled hair, dry skin, and a body that no longer responded as she wanted made her withdraw into herself, as if apologizing for getting old. But was it her fault? Have you ever sat across from someone who used to be so lively, only to find them strangely quiet? It's as if they've withdrawn from the world, even though they're still there. That's how I feel every night at dinner with my mother, and I started to get angry. Not because my mother was getting weaker, but because everyone thinks it's normal. No one warns you about this silent retreat. No one says, "Pay attention now. Don't wait until it's too late." Meanwhile, Mom was still trying to act okay. She was still peeling apples, but this time not as roundly. She was still smiling, but the smile did not reach her eyes. And when I asked my mother a very simple question, "Are you happy, Mom?" she was silent. That's when I understood. We couldn't wait any longer. Change didn't come through revolutions. It came one afternoon in the kitchen as I was struggling to find something my mother could eat without complaining. On the table were all sorts of untouched supplements, expired fish oil capsules, dusty vitamin D containers, and a list of restrictions as long as a prescription. I remember laughing dryly. At this age, eating also requires intelligence. And then I started doing the simplest thing, looking back at real food. The stuff my grandmother used to eat, the stuff that didn't have QR codes or improves function X. And when I introduced it to my mother, there was no thunder out of the blue. Just a quiet nod and a, "Okay, I'll try it." Oats was the first one, not the sugary apple cinnamon instant kind. I bought plain oats, cooked soft with a little almond milk, chia seeds, and a few slices of banana. Mom ate slowly, as if reminiscing. After a week, she began to sleep more deeply. It was a sweet side effect of beta-glucan, a fiber that helps stabilize blood sugar and boost serotonin. Blueberries was the second. I had taken the little fruit for granted until I read that the anthocyanins in its peel could help improve memory and reduce inflammation. Mom started eating a few every morning, with Greek yogurt. Soon I noticed she remembered her medication schedule without me reminding her. Spinach, a dish she used to call grass. But I changed the way I cooked it, steaming it briefly, and then sautéing it quickly with garlic and olive oil. This leafy green contains lutein and vitamin K, which support bones and eyes. Mom said her knees hurt less when she climbed the stairs after 3 weeks. Maybe it was coincidence. Or maybe her body was starting to thank her. Salmon, not the canned kind, but real, fresh fish, grilled with a little lemon. Twice a week, Mom has it for dinner. Omega-3s not only help keep her heart healthy, but also reduce arthritis, which Mom calls aching all night. After a month, she was off her daily painkillers. Turmeric, the ancient spice that Mom used to disinfect wounds, is now back in her nightly glass of golden milk. Just a pinch of turmeric powder mixed with warm milk and a dash of black pepper to enhance absorption. Curcumin, the main ingredient, is a powerful natural anti-inflammatory. Mom is starting to sleep better, and her morning joints are no longer stiff. I'm not saying it's a miracle, but when you see your mother smile gently after a meal, you understand. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the simplest things. And I also started to believe there is no age too late to start over. But the strangest thing is yet to come. Sometimes change happens as quietly as morning dew. You don't see it falling, but at some point the whole garden is soaked. My mother began to change in the same way. There was no magic moment. Just one morning I heard her singing softly in the kitchen. I stopped at the door, saying nothing, just stood there and listened. Her voice was small but warm. For the first time in months, I didn't hear any shuffling or sighing over the clatter of dishes. My mother, who used to sit down to rest after folding a few clothes, now sweeps the yard. Not out of compulsion, but as if it were a familiar habit. Revived. She starts waking up earlier than me, opens the windows to let in the sunlight, and prepares breakfast, as if her body won't get moving again. The tiredness that used to plague me every morning gradually disappeared. My mother said she no longer woke up at 2 or 3 a.m. anymore. I slept until 6 a.m. I don't know why, but I felt so refreshed, she said, her eyes sparkling like someone who had just emerged from a long dream. Without my urging, Mom began, walking around the neighborhood every afternoon. Her steps were no longer hesitant, as if she were afraid of falling. but steady and sure. "Do you feel different?" I asked her. She just smiled and said, "I feel like I'm alive again." Also noticed something strange. My mother smiled more. Not the tired, reassuring smiles, but real smiles, born of relief. The smiles of someone who no longer felt like a burden. Mom's blood pressure, which had fluctuated wildly, had stabilized remarkably. The doctor was surprised, and I said nothing. Why justify things that the body can heal itself if you feed it properly? The truth is, the body always wants to recover, but it needs to be given the right opportunity. And these foods, seemingly normal, are how we reopen that door. No need for detox, no need for extreme abstinence. Just go back to the simple thing. Eat to nourish, not to fill. Have you ever looked at a loved one and realized they're back? I had that moment just a few weeks ago. My mother, not the frail old woman, but the woman who had taken care of her little world, was now taking care of herself, and I started to believe if my mother could do it at 70, so can you. Or someone you love. But there is one last thing you need to understand. We often think of food as a convenience, something to stave off hunger, to fill our stomachs, or to satisfy our taste buds for a few short minutes. But food is more than just fuel. It's a message. Every bite is a message to your body that you want to live or just survive. When I look back at my mother's journey, from a tired, quiet person who gradually withdrew from the world to someone who can laugh, take walks, and even say, "I feel better than my age," I don't see miracles. I see choices. Opt for oatmeal instead of pastries for breakfast. Opt for blueberries instead of memory supplements. Opt for salmon, leafy greens, turmeric, instead of empty advice like, "You're old, you just have to deal with it." I will. Never forget one afternoon when my mother sat by the window, reading without her glasses. The light fell on her face, the face of someone no longer struggling with decline, but simply flowing with life. She looked at me and said, "You know, I feel young again, but not like I did when I was 40, like I did when I was still in control." That sentence made me speechless. Many people think it's too late to change at 70, but the scariest thing is not the illness. It's the feeling that you can't change. My mother is living proof. We can always come back to ourselves. Just start from the plate in front of us. And so do you. You're not listening to this story by accident. Maybe you're thinking of your mother, or your father, or yourself. Maybe you've sat at an empty dinner table not knowing where to start. Well, let's start with one. Maybe oatmeal, maybe a small glass of turmeric milk, maybe just deciding not to skip dinner tonight. Don't wait until things get serious. Your body doesn't need a rescue. It just needs a reminder that you care. Every bite is a loving gesture, and no one is too old for that, because after all, you don't just eat to live. You eat to remember who you used to be and who you can still become. You may be sitting in a quiet room. You may be surrounded by loved ones, or just a cup of tea that is getting cold. But if you are listening, your heart is open. This story isn't about oats, or salmon, or turmeric. It's about the little things we often forget, until it's too late. About a mother who seemed to be aging in an inevitable way. But with just a little gentleness from what she ate, she came back. Gently, step by step. Maybe you're waiting for something to change too, but change never comes from the outside. It comes from within, from the first meal you choose again, from the decision not to abandon your body. So tonight, choose one small thing. A bowl of oatmeal, a handful of blueberries, a warm glass of turmeric milk. It's not because you're running away from illness, but because you are returning to yourself. And if you feel like you're not alone on this journey, please leave a comment, share recipes your family trusts, like, share, and don't forget to subscribe, because there are so many real stories waiting to be told. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for staying until the end. wishing you and your loved ones a wonderful meal, and the mornings are so gentle.